Hello everyone, Burb here. I wanted to do a video using a format I haven't used in a few months, which is basically going over a singular mechanic in encyclopedic form and exploring as much as I really can about it. This is akin to the speed carryover video, as well as the Kid is in Black, Why Does She Not Give You Professor of Curvature, which was talking about chain event completion. Today, I will be talking about why does FINEMO not give you Speed Star. This mechanic is known as Agemasen, which is directly translated to you can't have it. I'll be going over a few things today. I'll be going over what it is. This is a rather basic mechanic, to be honest, so you may already know some of this, but I'll be going over what it is, give you some examples of cards that this is applicable to. It is not just FINEMO. There are plenty of cards in the game, as well as what I think the most useful part are how do you mitigate getting Agemasen and make sure that you go and grab your gold skills, as well as what is the impact when you do get Agemasen and do not get Speed Star or whatever gold that you are actually going for. At the very end, I tried to make this video a little bit more in depth, but this particular type of math gets complicated really quickly. So I'm not sure how useful that fifth point's going to be, but I wanted to at least tell the tale about how this video, which was supposed to just be a quick 1 hour preparation video, became like a 3.5 hour video that I had to abandon some of the math at the end. So I will be telling a story at the end. I'll let you know when that occurs for those who just are looking for the mechanic itself. But let's begin and talk about Agemasen. FINEMO, I somewhat lovingly and also somewhat truly call it a jobber card, because for me, more often than not, she gives me prepared to pass rather than Speed Star. And the reason for this is that her final chain event does not guaranteed give you Speed Star. There is an outcome that basically gives you prepared to pass instead of Speed Star. However, this is not just a 33% flip. This is based off of something else. She is not the only card that does this. Some cards we've used or will be using are going to have Agemasen flips and have the chance of giving you the white skill instead of the gold skill. An example was during the Mile CM, backliners would have probably used Bamboo Memory Guts and know very well that pumped was very often the thing that this card gave you rather than full of vigor. In the next CM, we are going to be using Bakushin Guts. Possibly, if you have Throne or you have Bakushin Guts, you can get Light as a Feather instead of the gold version of it, which I forget right now. If you are a backline late surger player, you know very well that Fast and Furious is not guaranteed from the Marvelous Sunday Power card, and a lot of times you will just get Position Pilfer. And if you have been going and trying to parent farm for full throttle, you know that Echinodictus Stamina also doesn't give keep going 100% of the time. She has full throttle. There's even some events on common cards that don't just give you the white skill, that give you various number of hints for it based on the different outcomes, or give you more stats as well. So, for example, the most common one is basically Chain Event 2 and Chain Event 3, I believe, of Kid is in Black, because We Walk Together can give you 3 hints or 1 hint for Professor of Curvature, and this is a lot of skill points that are added to your Uma at the very end of the race just because of hint level. Same thing that happens in Chain Event 2 with the Straightaway Adept, and stuff like Vodka Speed has that mile corners on the first chain event, and even CB, I believe, has corner recovery on Chain Event 2, having a split outcome as well. I technically don't 100% know these are also Agemasens. It's just my own feeling of it is that when the conditions for Agemasen hit, I usually get Agemasen, and when they don't, they don't. So I think these follow the same lines as the ones previous. The reason why I'm a little bit hesitant to 100% go and say that these are Agemasens is because we have stuff like Fukukitaru Speed, which is just a free 170-30 raw flip. And empirically speaking, that's what it's believed to be, is a 70% chance of success and a 30% chance of failure on this card, and there's no way for you to actually influence. So that is why I am hesitant to say that those are. But if they are, and every card that is an actual flip, the actual tell for it is that on the card itself, if you look at the final stage event, you can see that there are 2 versions of the actual skill itself, the gold and the white version, right on top of each other on what it gives. That means that there is a Agemasen flip, most likely. It is determined by the actual stat that the card is. So FINEMO is a wit card, so we are looking at the wit stat itself for the percentage chance of giving the gold skill. For something like Kidus in Black, I guess for that, but really like Bakashin Guts, you will be looking at the Guts stat using the same analysis. It looks on the time of the actual event itself, the value of the stat itself. This is from the race mechanics document. It is essentially a threshold system. If you have less than 400 wit, you have a 30% chance of speed star and a, I guess, 70% chance of prepared to pass. And that goes for any card for any gold skill. That is not very much, which means the real threshold that you really hope to hit before that third chain event happens is 400 plus wit. If you hit that 400 wit, you have a 60% gold skill chance to get speed star. After that, you progressively go and increase the percentage chances. 600 is 65, 700 is 75, 800 is 80, and 1000 or more gives 90, never really reaching 100%. So you can still fail these Agemasens at almost max wit as well. And while there's no real evidence to say that these aren't thresholds, however long that this mechanics has been out, this is through the JP server, it's been around for years, I'm inclined to believe that it is a threshold-based system. However, if you really want to, there is a quadratic fit you can kind of put on it, and it's relatively close to the values found in the race mechanics document. So the thresholds itself, I think, is what we're going for. The big one is, of course, at 400 of whatever stat your card is. That goes from 30% up to 60%, which is quite difficult on wit, especially in Track Blazer, because wit doesn't really help you win races, and you should be focusing on speed and power mainly. So what can you actually do? Well, unfortunately, a lot of it is out of your control. FINEMO can just decide to give all 3 of her events right at the start, and there's nothing that you can do about it. She can also decide to wait most of it and be nice, and basically make it a better chance that she actually gives you speed star. So there's a lot of stuff that's outside of your control when it comes to having these thresholds up. The 2 things that I can say that may help you is, 1, if you are actually really close to this 400 threshold and you have seen the second chain event of FINEMO or the chain event prior to whatever card you are trying to get the gold skill for on the final chain event, or I guess on any chain event for it, you should perhaps add extra weight to a tap that puts it above this threshold. And this technically goes for all the thresholds, but again, the big one is from less than 400 to 400 or more is literally double the chance of gold skill. So if you are at like 397 wit and you are able to hit a decent wit tap or a decent speed tap, you may choose the wit tap instead of the speed tap because you've seen FINEMO second chain event, and that may put you enough to get that speed star instead of that prepared to pass. It's still RNG, but that does increase your odds and should be considered. The other thing you can do is just run more sparks or initial stats for the stuff that is actually Agemasen. Maybe if you are running like FINEMO, instead of running 3 wit cards to get to 1200 wit, maybe you run 2 wit cards including FINEMO with some sparks on it, which means that your starting initial wit is higher. Obviously you have to have a count that can handle this and the flexibility for it, so that your sparks are higher on inits, and then you just don't gain as much in training because you have less of those cards. The same thing, this is more useful for speed and power right now because speed and power matters for winning races. Perhaps if you're running Marvelous Sunday Power, you run power sparks instead of speed sparks, and you add another speed card instead of a power card because you want to make sure you get Fast and Furious instead of Position Pilfer, just as an example. Those really are the only 2 things that you can do. You don't really have much agency in this, to be honest. It can just decide to give it to you in the first 3 turns. But how bad really is it that if you get prepared to pass instead of speed star? Well, this is just an efficiency calculation. Speed star is an additional 180 skill points. And the difference between the gold and the white version of the skill is 0.2 because it's target speed plus 0.15 versus target speed 0.35. And it's a 1.8 second skill, which means if you've seen any of the various different character videos, you know I use distance units, which is just basically, hey, it's meters per second times the length of the race divided by 100, but it's just simplicity. So 0.36 distance units will be compared with like anything else that you can buy at this point. It is a skill point efficiency of basically 500 skill points per distance units, or per meter per second per stretch, basically, because it's 180 divided by that 0.36. That's just 500, and that is actually rather inefficient. So Speedstar is really nice, but because it's also so expensive, it's rather inefficient to grab anyways. It's just mainly you have enough skill points for it, and it has a high chance of speed carry over in this next sprint champions meeting, which has additional value about 15% of the time, I would say. But I'm not going to go into specific track stuff. Just think of it as, hey, this is 500 skill points per distance units. We can go and compare this to Corner Adept, which is a 0.15 times 2.4 second skill, which is basically a 0.36 distance units as well. And this skill is also 180 skill points. So going and upgrading from white to gold is not very efficient. It's the same as grabbing another white skill of moderate value like Corner Adept. And when you get into the actual skills that are actually cheap and efficient, like Tail Held High, Slipstream, Playtime's Over, Umastan, and the like, you find that, hey, these white skills are actually incredibly efficient. Speedstar as a gold is like slightly more effective than most of the white skills in the game that aren't like straights or corners, or Tail Held High, or Playtime's Over, and the generic stuff. These ones are basically 3-second 0.15 skills that are super cheap at 100 skill points apiece. There's a few of them like this, and it's basically 222 skill points per distance unit, which is over twice as efficient to do so. So how do you mitigate getting Agemasen? Because honestly, Speedstar is one of the least efficient skills in the game because of its high cost. Well, you just make better parents. If you are able to go and parent build and have a significant number of white skills that you are filling up your UMA with other avenues of spending your skill points, you will find that even though you only get prepared to pass instead of Speedstar, instead of spending 360 skill points on Speedstar, if you were able to go and still go and grab the rest of your skills and just get stuff like Umastan, Playtime's Over, Tail Held High, Ramp Up, etc., 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 eventually you will run out of skill points anyways, and a lot of these things, like I showed you, are just simply more efficient as well. So take that into consideration, that if you spend the time to parent build, this will be less and less of a problem because you have other sinks for your actual skill points. This is also really true if you're running other cards with relevant gold skills as well, because you can just go and sink those points into other gold skills instead of the Speedstar itself. That's not to say Speedstar is a bad skill. It has a high chance of speed carryover relatively in this next champions meeting. It also has a chance to have a dead zone because it can proc after the spurt as well. So it's not the end of the world if you don't hit it in fine motion. That's really what I wanted to say in this video, is that we may miss it. Your run is not glue if you do not go and get Speedstar on your pace chasers here out. I'm going to grab a drink real quick. Here's the deal. For some reason, I wanted to go and make this a little bit more than what it really needs to be. That is the end of what I would call the quote-unquote useful information. If you're staying around at this point, you either really like math or you just like me talking about things and my struggles, because I attempted to go and push this a little bit further than necessary. This is technically a stochastic depletion process, which is a very fancy way of saying there are things removed when they are done. I attempted to go and basically try to calculate how often would it take to go and find how many turns on average would it take to reach that third chain event and find probabilities and such around. This is going to be slowly breaking down in terms of structure, by the way. And I said that, hey, based on my Kiddos in Black video, I kind of found that around 15 events, chain events, is good to just like 100% grab every single chain event. And I didn't really want to discuss missing chain events because that's added complexity. Oh boy, I'm glad I did that, but it still was too expensive. So I was taking the example of, hey, I'm using Marvy Power and a bunch of different cards. I have 15 chain events. It was like 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3. And I just said, hey, let's make this a 2 for simplicity reasons. I then went and said, hey, We have roughly 62 trainings where we can have actual events. There's 8 summer trainings that you can't have events on. There's 2 end-of-year trainings that you can't have events on. And then I figured out that, hey, you have the Christmas event, you can't have it, and other ones. So I estimated it out to be about a 25% chance that a chain event would occur, because I would find that, when I was at 16 or 17 chain events, I would usually miss one. I'd usually get about 15 over the course of the 60-ish turns that we went. That was sort of an assumption I was making for simplicity. I then wanted to go and look, hey, at what point will we be looking at? I wanted to look at end of junior year, midway through spring, end of summer, as well as the end of classic year. And I figured out what turn it was. It was like turn 24, 30, 35, and 40, where I had a chain events of 3 SSRs and 3 SRs for a total of 15 chain events. Those were my input parameters. And it was going well. Basically, all you have to do for selections is it's like you are going and putting your hand into a satchel or a bag and pulling out a random ball. And 5 of them are not a red ball, and 1 of them is a red ball. And if you pull the red ball 3 times, then that is when that 3rd chain event of fine motion or of Marvy power would hit. And it was basically trying to calculate how many times on average you would pull it out and which turn it would take to go and grab that and the percentage chance of doing so. It's very simple on the first turn. It's a 1 in 6 chance. There's 6 cards that have chain events. There's 3 selections. We're trying to find 3 selections of 1 card out of 6. So what are the odds that we go and pull out the red ball 3 times in a row? Well, it's just 0.1666666 over repeated, raised to the 3rd because of 3 selections for a 0.0416% chance, or roughly a 1 in 2,500, right? Well, things started getting complicated. This is close to a binomial problem. It's not really, but the what's it called? Estimation is, I guess. But basically, when you start going and increasing the number of trials from 3 to 4, you have to go and calculate the arrangements and the probabilities. So it's the same as the binomial problem. It's the number of arrangements where you can go and select 4 times and get exactly 3 red balls, basically. There's a survivorship thing that's being ignored about this, which pushes the probability a bit lower, but basically it is the binomial problem of 3 arrangements over 4 is 4. There's 4 ways to put 3 selections of red in a 4 grasp. I know you're probably all gone by now, but hey, that's what I'm doing. And then it's multiplied by the chance of success times the chance of failure. So it's 4 by 1 over 6 over 3 successes, multiplied by 5 over 6, which is 1 failure, and you find it's 1.54%. The problem is that after this dependency kicks in, after you get past 5 total trials, you have the chance of cards no longer being in the pools, which basically means at any point after the 5th draw, you make it so that the odds of grabbing that last chain event on a card is now a 1 in 5. And the problem with this is the math gets stupidly complicated, and I tried it for a while and it just didn't work. Some would say I flew too close to the sun, but even with artificial intelligence help, just trying to say, hey, this is the scenario, how would you model this? I couldn't independently verify this, is why I was having trouble making it. And I like to try to independently verify things. But even when it was trying to model it down into an equation, it makes sense what it's saying. It's just stupidly complicated. Basically, all it is saying is the summation of all the probabilities of 1 over 6 chances, and the 1 over 5s, and the 1 over 4s, and the 1 over 3s, and the 1 over 2s, and all 1 over 1s, with the probability of there being, it's each chance of 1 over 6 through 1 over 1, with the chance on each additional pull that it is that number of balls remaining. That is basically what this equation is saying, and that is the parentheses. There's 2 separate summations of equations that basically make a big 2D grid that is almost impossible to solve by hand or by calculator or even by procedurally generated stuff. So we are in the realms of trusting neural networks or me buying software that does this for me, which I was not going to do. And that is the point at which I had to abandon the actual showing the work. So I did plug it into a Monte Carlo simulation, which actually AI is actually quite good at. If you're wondering, um, it was actually pretty close. And we found that, hey, how many draws would it take to go and finish a FINEMO chain, let's say? If you have 15 chain events, what are the odds that the fine motion is just doing the first three all the way to the first 15? Another reason why I stopped this, by the way, is that I think there is some weighting that happens where, like, if FINEMO's first chain happens, the second chain and then the third chain is likely to happen immediately. That's kind of why I abandoned it, because I don't even think this is the most accurate model possible. This is assuming that every single card has a chain event chance of the exact same thing. Basically, the cool thing that you can see from this that I hope some of you appreciate is that it's basically a very, very steep bell curve where a lot of times that answer is somewhere in the 7 to 10 draws range. And we can go and basically make this with our 25% chance for simplicity. We just multiply by 4 and find that most times it's somewhere around the 32 to turn 40, which actually goes and lines up roughly around summer. So half the time before summer and half the time after summer is a very good estimate about when you will finish your Agemasen cards chain event. Which is kind of makes sense because it's kind of like that's half of the actual cards completed at that point in an ideal situation. And that's kind of the level that I went. I know it's not really great, but I wanted to share this story because you can see how simple stuff that you think in your head, that's like, hey, this is a problem that exists in real life. It's literally just grabbing balls from a bag. It's like the whammy, I forget that game show, it's like Price is Right or Let's Make a Deal, where you're just grabbing the balls and you're making sure you're not grabbing the bad ball 3 times. And that just becomes something incredibly complicated. So if you stuck around on this journey, thank you for letting me vent about, hey, I just spent 3 hours on this video that I didn't need to do so, and I definitely could have just stopped early. If you just liked the first part, I hope you did. I will be trying to stream CM tonight. I'm trying to get the CM guide RoleGuides out too. I think I'm confident about the 7.1 changes, but I kind of wanted to wait to see if they were actually implemented first. But we may be pushing one out early. Hope you enjoyed this. I've just been busy, but take care, everyone. Burb out.